The future of God of War might be far bigger than anyone expected. From rumors of a full-scale God of War 6 set in a brand new mythology currently in development, complete with Kratos' new signature weapon, which is rumored to be an Egyptian sword, to the highly talked about 2.5D spin-off game set in Greece with young Kratos that leaked earlier this year. The future of this franchise looks bright, and today we're going to be breaking down everything we know so far about what could be coming next. We have a lot to cover, so check the video chapters for easy viewing. But real quick, guys, now while we're talking about gods, let's shift from Kratos' world to another mythological battleground from today's video sponsor, Alestral's Awakened. Alestral's Awakened is a 2.5D pixel art monster catching RPG from the creators of the Alestral's trading card game. The Alestral's brand was founded in 2022 by A-Drive, who I've known for almost like 10 years at this point. If you've ever wanted a game that blends Greek mythology with that classic monster bonding feel, this is definitely a game to watch out for. The world is set during the Titan War, where players will challenge divines like Zeus and Poseidon, explore ancient temples, and bond with over 100 Alestrals across 8 elemental spirits. The combat runs on a clever spirit point system where your health and energy are one pool, making every move a real choice between power and survival. Right now, A-Drive and the rest of the Marathon crew are currently running a Kickstarter campaign for Alestral's Awaken that runs from October 14th to the 7th. Backing the Kickstarter is the only chance to get alpha and beta access, exclusive in-game unlocks, Kickstarter promo packs, and even become an NPC or caster in-game. So don't miss out. Back the Alestral's Awaken Kickstarter campaign via the link in the description before it's too late. So God of War 6 has likely been in development for a few years by now, with work starting right around the release of God of War Ragnarok and the Valhalla DLC. But according to several official reports over the last few years, the planning of God of War 6 started before Ragnarok even came out. These reports have been pretty consistent that God of War 6 is going to be yet another soft reboot, similar to how God of War 2018 was a soft reboot as well, and will bring Kratos to a new setting with a new mythology to battle, and presumably feature new combat mechanics, and potentially feature a new evolution in the God of War universe. And while Santa Monica Studios haven't officially commented or confirmed the setting of the reboot or the next game, there have been several people who have suggested that they know the next mythology, and there's actually a few teasers hidden in the Norse era God of War games that also tease the setting. Now, Cory Barlog is reportedly going to be the main director of the next game. Apparently, Cory Barlog's next game isn't necessarily going to be a sci-fi game. It's not even going to be a new IP. So that kind of tells me that he's probably working on the next iteration of God of War. And if we look at the timeline, Cory Barlog's last project that he directed was God of War 2018. Now, I'm sure he did help out with God of War Ragnarok, but it wasn't really his project, as Eric Williams was the game director for that game. Now, God of War 6, or whatever Cory's working on next, will be his production through and through, just like God of War 2018 was. Now, in the past, I've mentioned that Cory Barlog is working on a sci-fi project, but according to recent reports, that's not entirely set in stone. He is working on a new project, but it's not really considered a new IP, and it's not sci-fi either, which that information is coming from Jason Schreier, which he said in his article. Cory Barlog is not working on a sci-fi game, and it's not a new IP, although it is Sony Santa Monica's next big thing, which is likely going to be a continuation of an existing IP, although it might feel like a new one, which immediately after reading that kind of tells me that this next game is likely going to be something God of War related. It might not be God of War 6 with Kratos, but it could be something else in the God of War universe. So it could be an Atreus game. It's hard saying, but my money is on God of War 6 with Kratos at the helm, but this time it will be yet another soft reboot, likely evolving the format. Now, one thing that I would love to see happen is almost like the move from, Dark Souls to a game like Elden Ring, where if you look at, God of War and Dark Souls, they were kind of similar, but have God of War 6 make that jump like Elden Ring did and have it like a open world game set in something like Egypt. But that's just my speculation. Now, we do have some news regarding the mythology, and this is according to a statement from Tom Henderson, one of the most reputable names in gaming leaks. So from the sounds of it, God of War 6 will not only take place in the world of Egyptian mythology, but Kratos will also have a new signature weapon. Now, in the original trilogy, Kratos' weapon of choice was the Blades of Chaos. That was the signature weapon, and then we moved over to the Norse era where he got his Leviathan axe. God of War 6, however, will introduce a new signature weapon weapon, according to Tom Henderson, which will be a giant curved Egyptian sword. Now, it's unclear if Kratos' other signature weapons will return alongside the sword, but according to Tom Henderson, we at least know what the iconic weapon of the new Egyptian era is going to be. Personally, I would love to see the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan Axe come back in this next game, so we can have 3 signature weapons at our fingertips. But even if we're just limited to just one weapon, this seems like a very interesting way to shake things up. Now, there is a possibility that this signature weapon, being an Egyptian sword, is just a misdirection. Tom Henderson does like to get a bit cheeky. Like, whenever he said this, I'm sure he wanted people to think that the next mythology that Kratos will be diving into is going to be Egyptian, but it could be just, completely misdirected. What if the next game takes place in multiple different mythologies? What if Kratos goes to, Egypt and then goes back to Greece? Perhaps has some business to sort out with some Norse gods. It's hard saying, but regardless, if his weapon is a signature, giant curved Egyptian sword, you would think that Kratos is heading to Egypt. The gameplay and combat of God of War 6 is a little bit up in the air at this point because on one hand, Santa Monica Studios probably want to shake things up with this new reboot, but on the other hand, the God of War 2018 gameplay formula has basically become Sony's bread and butter game template, and if they want to keep God of War 6 closer to the Norse era in terms of the moment-to-moment experience, when you compare the classic God of War trilogy to the Norse era games, they are wildly different experiences, but when you compare the Norse era games to God of War 6, the differences probably won't end up being all that drastic. I definitely am expecting a new combat system, a new leveling system, and potentially even evolving the gameplay to an open world setting. Like I said, I think it would be very interesting to have an Elden Ring-like experience where I can just kind of picture Kratos heading to a giant structure, and then in the middle of that structure is a major boss that he has to defeat. Now, if I had to do some guesswork, I would say that God of War 6 is going to once again feature the unbroken single take style of cutscenes and gameplay that God of War 2018 and Ragnarok had, but the combat will likely be totally overhauled to be new. So it'll be like a reboot of the series, a soft reboot in terms of the combat and gameplay, but the presentation will be pretty in line with what we've seen and what we've come to expect since the PS4 era of PlayStation games. Now, that being said, if you've been missing the more old school style of God of War games, there have been a ton of reports floating around about a smaller game that is going to be a callback to the Greek era games with a smaller scale and a more cartoony art style similar to the Greek era games presentation. Several insiders have stated that Sony is currently funding a 2.5D God of War game that is allegedly going to be a Metroidvania style game, and it will be set during the Greek era of the franchise and feature combat that's closer to the hack and slash style formula than the heavier and more dramatic over-the-shoulder style of the Norse era. Tom Henderson released a report a while back about the spin-off, and from the sounds of it, it's going to be similar in size and scope to Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, or maybe, Metroid Dread. Insider Jeff Grubb also backed up Henderson's claim of a 2.5D Metroidvania God of War game, and several insiders thought the game was going to be revealed at State of Play earlier this year, but obviously that didn't happen. But when this many insiders are in agreement about a game existing, that usually means that there's some legitimacy to it, even if the exact details are disputed. Frankly, I think this makes a ton of sense. Game budgets are absolutely massive nowadays, especially under PlayStation Studios' umbrella, and there's a lot of demand for smaller, less extravagant entries in these franchises. And some of these smaller spin-offs have been the best reviewed games in their franchise in a long time. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown was an amazing way to revitalize the IP, and I absolutely love that game. There is clearly a demand for more old school style games, and if you're a major publisher like Sony, you're probably seeing these old school games as a way to fill your release schedule in between the major big budget installments. If Sony is looking for a way to hold fans over for the long wait between God of War Ragnarok and God of War 6, a smaller scale game based on the original trilogy is an amazing way to do that. All that being said, I think it's inevitable that the 2.5D spin-off game is going to be released before God of War 6. The whole point of greenlighting something like this is to hold fans over between the major installments, and I also think that Sony is going to be itching to get some God of War content out, especially with the Amazon Prime series releasing within the next 2 years. I mean, the God of War TV show is going to come out way before God of War 6, and they're going to want some kind of game out to capitalize on that, which this seems like a solid way for them to do that. This does raise the question though, is God of War 6 even going to make it out on the PS5? Frankly, with how long God of War 6 is taking, I'm starting to think Sony might just be planning on releasing it on the next PlayStation console, aka the PS6. According to recent reports, the PlayStation 6 is going to be released around 2027 or 2028. And with how long it takes for, PlayStation to release games nowadays, I'm starting to doubt if this is actually going to be a PS5 game. Now, I think this is all really depending on what Cory Barlog's next project is. If he is working on God of War 6, then that will likely be the next game out. But if he's working on something completely different, then we could be waiting a long time. Now, we know that Cory Barlog is working on something that is new. It's not a new IP though. So it could be something like, God of War 6. It's, a completely different vibe set in the Egyptian theme, or it could be like an entirely new God of War game set in Greek mythology. That being said, I don't think the God of War 6 is going to be entering full development for a while. It might not even be until like 2026 at the absolute earliest. That is, if, Cory's next game isn't God of War 6, then I have serious doubts this is going to release before the PlayStation 6 is out. But that's going to wrap it up with this video, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe with your noties on, and until next time, this has been Wes, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.